I've been building out a SaaS project in the side, and in that, for the pricing strategy, I've incorporated a subscription based model from Stripe. And to be honest, it was quite challenging to work with because there's a lot going on. You have your local production environment, you got Stripe, you got webhooks, you got database, you got even authentication. So all of these things together, playing together to make things work. So if it wasn't for this person, Nicholas, he's got this amazing repository which explains everything in detail. So he helped me understand this within a day. So the goal of this video is to teach you everything you need to know about subscriptions in Stripe so that you can integrate subscription based model in your SaaS or whatever, and we will try to achieve that in less than 30 minutes. I'm not promising anything, but that's our goal. Within less than 30 minutes you'll be equipped with the knowledge of integrating subscription based model for your SaaS. And FYI, this repository is based on Prisma, and for my project what I've used is DynamoDB for certain reasons. I'll explain that later. But in case if you're using DynamoDB, I've also got a repository which is called Stripe Subscription DynamoDB. In this I use DynamoDB instead of Prisma, so you can check that out. If you don't understand, you could let me know in the comment section below. I'll help you figure this out, or I'll also bring a video if you want me to. So that's basically it. Let us move on to the video part. Before we actually begin, let me demonstrate how this works. So this is my sign-in page. So in my Stripe customer tab, there's just one customer right now, which is me as a guest. So don't pay any attention to that. And if I go to billing subscriptions, there's nothing right here. So now if I go here, and also my Prisma Studio, if I refresh this, you can see there's nothing here. So now if I sign in, if I click one of my accounts, you can see the webhooks being triggered right here. As you can see, the customer created and got sent back to my local host. If I go to customers, now refresh this, you can see the new user here. If I go to my Prisma, refresh this, he's been updated in Prisma as well. And right now the subscription is not active because he's not clicked any of the subscriptions, so it's false. But now if I go to standard, you can see the webhooks again. Now I'll just hit since this is a test mode, I'll just hit some random numbers here and hit start trial. You can see all those webhooks being triggered. I'm sent back to the dashboard, and if I go to my customers, billing, subscriptions, you can see he started his subscription. And if I go to my Prisma Studio here, refresh this, is active is true, and the subscription is also there. Now finally, if I hit cancel subscription, again the webhooks are triggered here. If I go back here, I refresh this, you can see it cancels at July 11th, which is after a few days. And if I go back here, this still remains the same because if I refresh this, this is still the same. It will only change to false when this time hits. So when this user hits July 11th, a trigger is fired which will change this to false. So that's basically what we'll be building. Let's move on. So I've got a minimal NextJS app installed here with Prisma and NextAuth. As you can see, this is just the bare minimum what you can find from the docs, and I've also added an adapter here, Prisma adapter. And if I go to my Prisma schema here, I've got 3 to 4 models. This is from here. So if you go to NextAuth Prisma adapters, you get their initial code from here. I just copied it out and pasted it right here. So that's what this is, and we're using the SQLite database because this is just for demonstration reasons, and so we are not using any external database like PlanScale or Superbiz. So that's what we are working with. And if I go here, we have a login button. In the login button, we have certain conditions. If the user is active, we will have that field later on. He'll be pushed to the subscription page. If the is active is false, he'll be pushed to subscription. If not, he'll be pushed to the dashboard page. And once the user signs in, he is redirected to the subscription page. And for the subscription card, if I go to subscription here, pages, we are mapping over an array of subscriptions. So if I go here, constants, here we have 3 plans, which is basic, standard, premium, and I've got the price ID for each one of those. If you don't know how to do that, check out the last video. I go in detail on how to get the price ID and so on. So we are mapping through that array. So we are mapping through that array, and we are rendering out a card called subscription card, and each of those cards will have an on click. As of now, I have not configured it. We'll do that together, and we are rendering out some data, which is the plan type, price, and this description. So that's what we are working with. So to start off, let's go to Prisma schema, and in here we'll need 3 fields, extra fields for Stripe to work, which are Stripe customer ID, which will be a string. This will be optional. It will be also unique, and we'll have a is active field to check whether the user has an active subscription or not, and this by default will be false. Then we'll have a subscription ID, which will be required when the user unsubscribes. So that will be a string type, which will be optional. So once that's done, let me push the changes. So npx prisma tb push. So this will define the schema for us. As you can see, we got a new file here called dev.db. So once that's done, we can head over to NextAuth and start. In our NextAuth file, we have something called events that occur when certain things happen. So for example, there is sign in, there is sign out, but what we'll be using is createUser. So this basically is triggered when a new user is created. This is triggered. So inside that, what we'll do is I'll actually destructure the user. Alright, so in here we'll initialize Stripe. So once this event is triggered, we can use Stripe, so await Stripe, and create those customers. So we can trigger something called stripe.customers.create, which will create customers for us. So we'll give the email, which is user.email, and we'll also give name is equal to username, and this error will go if I give an exclamatory here. So this creates the Stripe customers for us. So after we've created the customers from Stripe, we'll have to push this to the database. So in order to do that, we chain a dot, then we have a callback function with customer, and we return it with prisma.user.update, where the user ID is user ID, and we give it the Stripe customer ID as customer ID, which we are getting from Stripe. So this basically pushes the customer to our database. So once that's done, and also if I've also configured here the types, so you might be getting an error if you're using TypeScript for the user. So go to the declare, just go to types, declare module NextAuth, and for the interface session I want you to add these 4 fields, and for user add these 3 fields. So that will get rid of all the errors for you. So once the user is created, we need to have access to certain properties in the session. So to do that, we get some callbacks which NextAuth provides us. So if I go here, callbacks, and so in here we can add some additional properties to our session. So if I, and let me type out those additional properties, which are ID, Stripe customer ID is active, and subscription ID. So let me type that out. So what we are doing right now is, in the call, once the callback is triggered for the session, we are inserting some properties to the session, which are the user ID, Stripe customer ID is active, and subscription ID. So now if we go to our components, if we go to any of the pages, we'll have access to these additional properties, which will be required for Stripe to work properly. So with that, we've configured our NextAuth. So now let us try whether everything works or not. So let me go back to, I'll run the server. So npm run dev. Let me refresh this. I'll also okay, don't mind this. This is something which I was playing around with. So as you can see, there's now just a guest user, which is me. So once that's done, it's loading. Okay, I'll sign in. That should lead me to this page right here, and I'll select one of my accounts. It should redirect me to the subscription page right here. So now if I go back to customers, refresh this, we have a new customer called Takeke. And let us also check our database. So let me go to my terminal and npx Prisma Studio. Let's go to user, and you should see some additional fields. As you can see here, Stripe customer ID is active is false. By default it should be false. Yeah, so as we've, if I go back here, we are pushing the Stripe customer ID to our database. So with that, we've done the first portion, which is the authentication part. All right, so now let's move on. Let me expand this. Now so since we are in the subscription page, since we are in the subscription page, let us move to the subscription page. So under subscription folder, I have a page, and inside here I have something called subscription card. So let's go inside that. So in here we'll have to once the user clicks this, he has to be redirected to the Stripe checkout page. So let's configure that now. So on the on click, let me create an on click here, so which will be handle create checkout session, and we'll also give a price ID, which is coming from if I go to constants here, I have a price ID. We are looping over this, we are mapping over that here, and we are sending each of the subscription card with a price ID, and that we are giving it here. Now let us create this function. So under just above the return statement, nfn and create session, this will be a product ID. This will be a string, and let me just give a okay, so I've created a response to API Stripe checkout session, which is not yet created. We'll create that, and I'm sending the product ID to it. And we also have headers. And next, what we need is, once we get this, let us get the checkout session. So checkout session from the response. So res, we'll await it, res.json, and to get just the specific attribute of that object, let us chain a then function. So inside that we'll have value dot session. And I've probably made an error somewhere. So what we're doing right now is getting the session from the response JSON, and we are getting just the session. Since we'll be sending an object, we are taking the session out and putting it to this checkout session. Next up, we have to create a stripe, which we're getting from here, get stripe. So this basically I got from here, setting up from their documentation. It is said that you are supposed to import stripe in this manner, which I think is called the singleton pattern. So yeah, so just create a file under utils, get stripe JS, and paste in this value. So that's basically what I've got here. So once that's done, we can destructure something out. Let me type that out now. We can destructure error from await stripe dot redirect to checkout, and we also have to give it a session ID called check session, checkout session ID. I actually used to use window dot location dot href, but there's a method for this, so this will redirect the user to the Stripe checkout page. So now let us create this page now. So under API, let me create a new folder called checkout session, checkout session, and inside here let me put this in API. Okay, and inside here I need another folder called Stripe. Let me put this so that everything is in one folder, all the Stripe related paths. We'll rename this to perfect. So now I have a folder called Stripe. In there I have a checkout session folder, and let me create a new file now called route.ts. So in here let me insert some code, boilerplate code. So what we're doing is we are getting the body from rec.json, and we're just console logging it out so that we can see what is happening. Next, let us initialize Stripe here so that we can create a checkout session. Next, we can create a session which this time is get server session. So now we have access to the session. We are also providing it the auth options from NextAuth. So if I go here, so we are giving it this auth options to get server sessions right here. So now we have access to the session. So now we can perform a check. So if the session does not exist, we can just give a JSON response that the user is not signed in. So this won't trigger our Stripe. Next, we can move on to the Stripe portion. So if I go to Mozilla here, they mention how to create a session So we'll be doing that now. Let's go here under the if condition. In here, let us create the checkout session. So inside, we'll have to mention the mode, which is a subscription mode. You have payment setup and we'll be using subscription. Next is the customer. So you'll have to give it the customer who wants to subscribe. So that will get from session user dot Stripe customer ID. Stripe customer ID. So this will tell Stripe which customer wants to subscribe. So once that's done, you can just mention the line items, and here we give it an array object. We have the price ID. So the price, this is the price ID. So we'll be getting that from the body. So if I go back to subscription card here, we are giving into the product ID. We are sending it and we are getting that here. That's what we are giving here. So once we've given the product, the price ID, we'll also mention the quantity, which is 1. So once that's done, we can give a success URL, which is process.env.next. Okay. So we give a URL. So this basically is in the env file, which just points to localhost. So when you're shipping into production, you'll have to change this in the env variable, and then we give the session ID with the checkout session ID. So this will in the path, this will be having access to session ID. Next is the cancel URL. So I'll just copy this, paste it right here, and just remove this. So if it gets cancelled, we can just push them back to the main page. Yeah, so we have the cancel URL as well. This one plus. Okay, next property is the subscription data. Subscription data. Here we can send some metadata, so metadata is basically things which will be having access to in a subscription object when we will be handling with the webhooks. So metadata, inside that we pass it the paying user ID. You don't actually need this, but just for information's sake, I'll put this as well, metadata. And lastly, so whenever you're having a SaaS project, you'll have to give it a trial period of time so that the users can play around with the application and figure out whether it's for them or not. So to do that, they give us another property called trial period days. So you can mention the amount of days the trial period should last. So in our case, it's 14. So yeah, so we've done that. So this is the main checkout session object configuration, and lastly we'll have to send a response back to the client. So let's do that. So before sending a response, we'll have to check whether there is a URL attached to this object. If there is no URL attached to the object, we'll have to send a message. If there is a URL attached, so if there is a URL attached, we can just send a JSON of session object and a status of 200. So with that, we have finished the backend portion, API routing. So once again, this is the front end. We are sending the product ID here. We are getting the product ID. We are telling Stripe which customer wants to subscribe, and also the product in the body. This is the price ID. And once that's done, we send a response to the front end with session. So right here, we'll be destructuring that out with value.session and putting that to checkout session. Then with Stripe, we redirect the customer to the Stripe checkout page with the session ID, which we're getting from here. So that's basically it. Now let's try whether this works or not. So let me go back here. I'll refresh it just in case. Okay, it's signed in as Takeke. I'll hit basic and let's see what we get. So as you can see, it's a 14 days free trial, and we are redirected to this page. You just have to give your card info and you'll get subscribed. So but before this, we also need to configure webhooks. So let's do that so that I can show you how everything plays out at the end. Let me go back. So again, so this is basically the cancellation page. I've mentioned it right here. So if right here, so if the cancel URL is basically the home page, which is here. Let's go to and configure our webhooks portion for this build. So before moving on, let me explain what exactly webhooks are. So when our local production environment is communicating with Stripe, Stripe basically sends out some triggers, and webhooks are something that listens to these triggers and they make changes to the database. That, in the simplest terms, are what webhooks are. So now if I go to our home, developers, and in here if I go to webhooks, I can say add endpoint, and if this is for our production build, which we won't be configuring, so if I hit select events and go to customers, these are all the events that can be triggered, or to put it more precisely, these are the events that you can listen to. But since we are developing in our testing environment, let us actually do this. So this is the initial boilerplate code which you'll be needing. So let me just go back here under API. Let me create a new folder called webhooks, and inside that let me create a new file called route.ts, and in here let me paste in all the code. So in here let me paste in the code. So this is configured according to NextJS. So here they're using Express, so I've just changed a little bit so that we NextJS is used instead. Otherwise everything is same. So these are all what has come from Stripe. What we are concerned with is this right here. So if I go to this check drop down here, and if I say I want to listen to invoice upcoming, you can see that this changes are being made, and you can just copy this out and paste it right here. So that's what I did. So I'll be listening to events such as customer.subscription.created and deleted. So when the customer first is created, this event is triggered, and when it's deleted, this event is triggered. So there should something should happen in this case. So let's do that now. So in here let me say await Prisma.user.update. So we want to update something, and that something is basically where subscription ID, Stripe customer ID is subscription.customer, and I'll just say asterisk so that we get rid of the error. Okay, then we say data, and we keep pass in is active is true, and subscription ID is subscription ID. So yeah, so we have an object called subscription which we're getting from Stripe, and I'm getting the subscription ID so that this will be used when we are when the user cancels their subscription. So in Nicholas's repository this process is not done. This is what I did. So in our we invoke our Prisma and say we want to update our Stripe customer ID, and we say that is active, so the subscription is true, and we also add the subscription ID. So this subscriptions ID we add. Now I can do the same for what happens when the customer unsubscribes. So under customer.subscription.deleted, I'll paste in this, but instead of passing in the subscription ID, which is not required for in case the subscription is deleted, I'll change the is active to false. So the subscription is turned off. And I'll take one of the break statements. I'll save all this and I'll save this as well. So now, in order for us to listen to the webhooks, Stripe provides us this script which allows us to forward all the events to our local host. So this cannot be done in a production build. Just for the testing purposes, we have this here so that you can see and understand how this works. So let me just copy. Okay, before that we'll have to log in to Stripe. So I'll create a new instance of my terminal, Stripe login. I think I've already logged in, therefore I don't need it. Okay, I hit enter and I can just authenticate it, allow access. That's fine. So I have access, I've logged in now. So next what you can do is we have to forward those events to localhost 3000. Let me go back here and change this to 3000, and this will be under API webhooks plural. So API webhooks. I'll just close this out so that you can see better. Okay, so under API webhooks route, that's what this path is. Now hit enter and it should give me a secret key. So as you can see, it's completed here. So now it's listening. So this key you'll have to add to your env variable. Here Stripe webhook secret, you'll have to add that in here. So as this is env.example, I can show you this, but .env, well, make sure you put that in the .env file and not the .env.example. So once that's done, we can test our whether this webhook is fired or not. So let me go back here and let me go to my next app. So I'll hit basic. It should forward me to the checkout page. As you can see here, now all of these events are triggered and it is being sent to localhost 3000. So yeah, so if I go back, so signed in as Take K. So this is the dashboard. If I go to back to customers, I go to products, or I think it's billing, subscriptions. You can see I started my trial and in July 11th, which is it's created in June 27th. So and the trial end in 14 days, which is July 11th. All right, so with that we have done that part. Now all that is left is to configure this cancel subscription part. So let's do that now. So for cancel subscription, we can just copy out the checkout session folder. I'll just copy that out and paste it right here. Okay, so I got a copy and I'll just rename it to subscription cancel. I think that's spelled correctly. I can go back here to this route and I'll just clean out all this. So we'll need a session. This will be the same, and the only thing which will be different is let us get the subscription ID. So const Stripe subscription ID will be from session dot user dot subscription ID, and instead of using create, we can update this. So So update, and we don't need any of this. We don't even need this, and this won't be an object. Yeah, so now inside here we can give it the Stripe subscription ID, and I can say cancel cancel at end period. Okay, I'm getting an error. Let me just check out what that problem is. I probably have to import this. Okay, so instead of it being checkout session, it should be subscription dot update. Yeah, so that error is gone. We don't need this no more. Okay, so I've given it the Stripe subscription ID. So when the user deactivates his subscription, I don't want him to immediately lose his access to the service. So in order to avoid that, I want to cancel only at end period. So once he hits cancel on say 13th and his subscription is about to get expired on 14th, it won't get expired till that date. So I'll say true, and I'll also send a metadata to paying which is paying user email. So this is not required. If you don't want this metadata is like not required, even if you don't give this, it's fine, but I'll just give it because in okay, why am I getting an error? It's probably because of an exclamatory here. Okay, that's fine. So in the MongoDB, when I was using MongoDB instead of Prisma, I actually needed paying user email just to make changes to my database. But in this case, you don't need this. So you can just comment this out, no worries. But if you're using MongoDB, you probably might need this. Not MongoDB, sorry, it's DynamoDB. Okay, so this is the backend. Now let's go to the front end. I'll just remove all of this, go back to dashboard page, and I have a cancel subscription already here. I've already configured this function. So we are having a response which is to API Stripe, and it is subscription cancel. We are destructuring the subscription. So if I go here, we are okay, good thing I noticed that this should not be session, this should be subscriptions. Oops, this should be subscription, and I'll send this right here, subscription. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so subscription, we are sending, where is that? We are destructuring the subscription, we are console logging it out, and then we are pushing the user back to subscription page. Okay, now let us try this. Go here and I'll say cancel subscription. Let's see what happens. Okay, nothing happened. Let me check what the problem is. Unexpected end of data. Okay, fine, I probably messed that up. Let me check that. We actually don't need all this, and this should be a get request. Probably didn't have copied it. Get request, and this is also a get request. Fine, I think now it should work. So I'll hit cancel subscription now. Yeah, so you can see customer.subscription.got updated, and it was sent back to our local host. So if I go back here, trial ends, I'll just refresh it. And you can see it cancels at July 11th at the end of the trial. So that's basically it. So with that, I think you are equipped with all the knowledge which is required for you to add subscription based pricing in your SaaS. So let me just cancel this out. No, actually I'll run that again. Now let me just demonstrate how it goes without from the beginning. So I'll sign out. I'll refresh my Prisma Studio. Go back here. I'll sign in. Take one of my accounts. I sign in. Okay, so I've signed in, establish a color. Now if I go back here and go to customers, okay, so as you can see, the new customer is created. But if I go to billing and subscription, he's not subscribed yet. And let me go to my Prisma Studio, refresh this. This is the new user. And if I go here, he's not active because he's not yet clicked on any of the subscriptions, and there's no subscription ID as well. So now if I go back here and say premium, I'll just do that and do that again. So 424242, it's fine. I give my current location and I hit start trial. You can see all the triggers being fired here. He's pushed back here to the dashboard, and if I go back to my this billing page here, I refresh it, scroll down, and he is now subscribed. And if I go back to Prisma Studio, refresh this, you can see is active is now true, and he has also a subscription ID. And let me go back here. I hit cancel subscription. Okay, now let me go back to dashboard, refresh this, and it cancels. And if you noticed, if I refresh this, this is still true. This won't be false until we have reached this date. So once this date is reached, Stripe sends off that event called subscription deleted, and only then this is changed to is active false, and which will be reflected here. So until then, the user will have access to the dashboard. So that's basically it. Hopefully you understood something from this. And yeah, before leaving, whenever you're configuring for your production build, your you should add the add endpoint here, which is instead of localhost 3000 /API/webhooks, it'll just be your domain name and slash, I'll just type that out here, domain.com or domain name.com, which should be API slash, and it should be, I think, webhooks. You just select all the events which you want to listen to. So in our case, it was customer, so it will be customer subscription created and customer subscription deleted. So you hit those two, you hit add events, you'll get a webhook secret. You'll have to copy that and paste in wherever you're deploying it to. So yeah, so that's basically it. Thanks for watching. Make sure you give a star to Nicholas.